Hello, it's your host, Matt Stickland. This is just a little note to say that this episode is a bonus episode. Last week, I asked you to do some homework, and this week, I decided to answer that homework for you. I will say, though, off the top, hello, not a funny cold open, very sorry. Although, are they all? Are any of them? Who knows? Anyways, this episode does mention Nazism, and in the current climate, I figured I'd give you a warning, but also, please remember that analogy, because after I recorded this episode, I found out why the city is broken, and you're going to want to hear Monday's episode. But until then, enjoy this homework.
Hello and welcome to the Grand Parade Podcast. We are coming to you live to tape from Semipole Cafe on Agricola. My name is... It's on, yeah, we're going already. My name is Matt Stickland. I'm one of your hosts, City Hall reporter and editor of Grand Parade newspaper. And if you remember, in the last episode, I said that everyone needed to do their homework. And then I got some feedback that maybe that was a little bit unfair to the general listeners. So I decided who is someone who I know who does a lot of planning about transportation in Halifax. And then so I figured... Well, it's Kevin Wilson, the guy who runs HFX By Bike. And so I figured I'd bring him on the podcast, and he and I would go through our approaches to planning, and maybe we can come up with some sort of solution to fix Halifax's bus rapid transit. So, Kevin, how you doing today? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me on. I'm Kevin. I run the YouTube channel HFX By Bike, a channel all about getting around Halifax by bike.
It's not all about that, because sometimes you redesign what things should look like.
Well, I just go on little rants about what I try to help. I guess the premise of the channel is just to help people visualize what a good, functional city would look like, mostly through the lens of bike infrastructure, but not exclusive to that. So I'll redesign traffic if I think I can just make a street work better for cars and pedestrians and everyone involved.
Perfect. Yeah, and just to give people a little bit of context about how we're going to do this first, and Kevin as well, because I kind of gave you a rough outline, but the specifics are a bit up in the air. So essentially what my thought is I'm going to ask you some questions about how you think about planning, how you think about doing your alternatives when you're doing your planning scenarios. And then I'm going to explain how I approach planning in my military background. And then between the two of us, we're going to go through the BRT. We're going to highlight some of the issues that we think exist. We're going to highlight what we think the plan is trying to achieve. And then we're going to come up with ways that we would achieve those plans within the limitations of priorities and the instructions in the plan themselves. So, but first, so I watched your latest video is about the Halifax Commons and fixing the transportation around Halifax Commons, specifically part 2. It was a two-parter. I personally think 20 minutes is not too long for a video. You know,
that's anything over 10 minutes is excessive.
Okay, for you, it is on your end?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the goal.
All right, so because Kevin is lazy, 10 minutes is enough.
I'm out of here. That's my warning. I'm out of here in 10 minutes.
Okay, so, but so can you talk to me about how you approach kind of like fixing the transportation or proposing solutions to transportation around Halifax Common, because it came up recently, or part of it came up recently in council chambers when we're talking about bus rapid transit on Roby Street in the approach from Almond to Kennard in the approaches to the Commons. And so, but when you're talking about, you know, coming up with fixing such a huge, important interchange like the Halifax Commons, what do you take into account? Like, where do you start that?
So part of it is just like local knowledge. Like I live, a block away from the Halifax Commons, so I'm through there almost every day on my bike. Yeah. So I'm through there almost every day on my bike. And the way that I tend to look at it is like, what would make my life better? And I try to apply that to all my videos and just kind of look at even places where I'm not through there all the time. What are the obvious problems? So like you get around by bike pretty frequently. So you probably run into a lot of parts of the city where it's like, and now if I were going by car, I'd go in a straight line. I'd be there in 5 minutes now because I'm going on bike, and that's a highway or even just like a non-highway murder death zone.
Dahlia Street, yeah.
Yeah, of course. You're now going to go for a 20-minute detour or a 10-minute detour or even just like a 5-minute detour. And so a lot of my designs are aimed at just getting rid of that. What's the cheapest, fastest way of making the bikes go in a straight line? And applying the same thing to transit or even just cars sometimes.
Okay.
So I guess the thing I try to do is just pick a goal. What is the path of least resistance? And a lot of times there's just stuff like extra car lanes that don't actually add capacity.
Right.
That's free. as they say, that's free real estate. It's something I can just take and put a bike lane on it, and the bikes are happier and no one is worse off.
And when you say it doesn't really add capacity, now I know the answer to this question, but I'm assuming a large portion of our audience kind of has an idea of what the answer to this question is. But like, what do you mean by that? When it doesn't add, because like if there's 2 lanes on a road, that doubles the car capacity. So why wouldn't it actually double the car capacity?
Sure. So the rate limiting factor for traffic flow is at the intersections rather than inherently the number of lanes. So
Right.
a traffic lane can, say on a highway, if it's just free flow traffic, that can move about 1,800, 1,900 cars per hour. That's
Right.
the city's running assumption, and that's pretty consistent across cities. And it kind of makes sense if you assume a follow distance of 2 seconds.
Right. So in much the same way, like the capacity of my household plumbing system is whatever 1,000 liters a minute, thanks to the pipe size, I guess. But it doesn't actually matter what that capacity is if my faucet is off, or if it's coming out of my garden hose and then out of the squeezy thing at the end, the nozzle handheld thing at the end. Because there are limitations in the water flow that take it down from the 1,000 liters a minute or whatever it is for my household. Yeah. So same type of principle.
Yeah, that's it. So if you have 2 lanes that flow into an intersection that only supports 1 lane at the end of it, then it has 1 lane of capacity, because
Right.
you're going to need some kind of traffic signal to determine kind of who goes where when. And so we have like not a ton of places, but I think I pointed out to you one on Cogswall where there's essentially like 2 to 3 lanes of space for an intersection that can absorb like 1 lane of traffic.
Right,
And so
yeah.
it's like, so you have 1 lane and then you like paving stuff as a hobby, basically.
Yeah, well, you got extra capacity for people to queue up for the choke points.
That's it. And sometimes that's useful. Like there's places like I think in the part 2 of the video at the Roby and Kennard intersection.
Yes.
I essentially made the point of like, hey, space is really constrained here, and you probably you're losing out on a turn lane if you put bike lanes in here, and you can make that trade-off or not. Like the option's there if you want it, but there's some places where you get kind of free real estate. And then there's places where you do have to make the choice of, hey, you get a car lane or a bus lane, you don't get both.
Okay. Is there anything else you kind of want to talk about before we actually get into the weeds of like actually fixing the BRT, hypothetically? Is there anything else you want to say about kind of how you approach transportation planning problems in your videos, or just kind of in general that you think might apply when we're talking about the BRT over the next however long it takes us?
I would say I tend to emphasize kind of cost effectiveness. I'm constitutionally a cheapskate.
Okay.
And we'll just always go for like, oh, why would I tear down those buildings, spend $100 million when I can just do this one block over? So I often go for like, I rarely widen roads or do anything. I try to reapportion what's already there.
Right, which makes sense if you don't want to spend money. Okay, and then so just for context, I come from a military background, and the military is famously famous for planning, I guess. And I'm going to say that my planning, my strategizing tactics are military influenced, because I also had a father who was a supply chain manager. So I'm also in tune with how to do like supply chain logistics, and my dad was a big proponent of switching from, it used to be where you had to like hold up a bunch of stock in your warehouses just in case, and then there was a big shift to just-in-time supply chains, and my dad was a big part of helping a bunch of companies do that. So like my management style and strategic management style is influenced by the military and a dad who did supply chain management. So for me, when we're talking about, and we'll just roll right into it here because I think this is probably the best way to get into it, but for me, when we're talking about bus rapid transit, if you're talking about how I'm approaching this from a military background, we need to start with like, what is the situation on the ground? What is, you can either do this one of 2 ways, either what is our commander telling us that they want to do, or what is the problem we want to solve? And in this case, I think we're lucky, and Halifax has strategic plans that kind of do both. And when we're talking about the strategic plans, it's important when you're in the military, especially because the Canadian military trains people to think for themselves, especially if they're officers or in leadership positions, so that on the battlefield they can make decisions without like calling back up the chain of command, being like, here's an example. Say, for example, I'm in charge of an infantry unit. We're advancing on this building, and my orders are to go and set up so I can do covering fire on this building. And my orders are to go about 100 yards away, because the effective range of a rifle is 200 yards, so go about 100 yards away, and then set up so you can do covering fire. And one of the big parts about what the military does is that something called the commander's intent. Like, why are you telling me to do this? So that way when I go up there, if my orders are, okay, I'm laying a base of fire, I got to be 100 yards away. If there's really good cover 120 yards away, and really good cover 75, 60 yards away, if I'm just hanging back and just doing covering fire,
I'm setting up at 120 yards. But if I'm providing covering fire for an advance that I am then going to do on this building, I'm going to take the cover that's closer to the building. So when I get to that situation, when it's like, oh, I have a choice I need to make here, which one do I do? What do I want? What is my commander sending me here to actually do? Not the specific step one directions, but like what is the outcome he wants or they want? And then how do I get that? How do I achieve that? Or how do I think I can achieve that once I'm in the field? How can I make that decision on my own? So commander's intent for me is a really big thing. And I think what would be helpful is trying to like distill what council's intent is, both either through the plans, which are very important to staff's instructions, but also kind of through the debates they have about things, you know, whatever in council chambers. So for example, one of council's priorities for me, I think is the same as yours, which is don't spend money if you don't need to. Our old mayor was all about keeping the tax rate low. Our new mayor wants to keep the tax rate flat. All of our councillors, I think almost all of our councillors, Janet Steele, I think, is the only one who has recently said, well, maybe we should have more taxes. But so I'm just going to assume that no one wants to spend money if they don't want to. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that is the recurring theme over the last 10 to 20 years for Halifax.
What other priorities do you think they got? We'll go back and forth here. Maybe I can keep talking, but
oh gosh, honestly, like most cynical take, don't make voters mad is probably their actual underlying thing? Or do you mean like their strategic?
We're talking about what is the intent. Like, so when council is giving instructions to staff, what if you were implementing council's strategies, what do you think their intent of these strategies? Like, what do you think the intent of the BRT
the overarching
is?
goal?
Yeah.
So on paper, the goal is to get people to make the switch from driving into, especially downtown, because it is a fairly downtown-oriented transportation plan, to get more people in the suburbs in particular to make the choice to say, oh, I'm not going to drive. The bus is a viable alternative.
Yeah, modal shift, I think, would be...
That's the
technical
catchphrase.
jargon. Yeah. So getting people out of their cars and into something else. I would argue that road safety is a big thing. We don't want people dying needless or preventable deaths on Halifax's roads. There's this campaign where it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't expect to die at work. Well, I would argue you shouldn't expect to die going to and from work. However, this year we're on pace for a record year in road deaths. So good job, Public Works. But yeah, so that's crazy though, eh? Because we're 5 years. We've just renewed our road safety plan, which was so good. We made it better, and we're on pace now for a record year of road deaths.
Matt, we can change the criteria later. It's fine.
What do you mean?
We can just increase the limit for what's an acceptable level of road deaths later.
Oh yeah, why don't we just do per capita based on population?
Sure.
That way the road deaths can go up, but then we can still claim success.
Yep.
Yeah, and we should pair it with critical injury collisions so that way those two numbers are linked forever. So even if deaths go up,
it's cool. It's fine.
Yeah, the injuries will hide the fact that the deaths are going up. So yeah, I think we should keep doing that. Anyways, okay. So road safety, throwing shade is over. Shade zone is done. Except for the fact that bus stops should also get some shade. Anyways, no, but so road safety, I think, is a priority or one of council's intents, and that is achieved by, getting people out of cars, less cars, whatever. So increasing road safety, I would say, is an intent. Do we really need anything else beyond get buses faster, like get people out of their cars, get buses faster, prevent people from dying, don't spend any money? Do we need anything else?
Those are the big ones for me.
Yeah, I think that's it. If you have any other ones, just pay attention to how we go through this, and then figure out how that priority would work through this process. And I'd be curious to know if you're listening and you do that with a different priority, what solutions you come to, because I'm inviting everyone to do. This is an open book test. Okay, so we have our commander's intent, and we have the situation on the ground. What is this? What are the problems with the situation on the ground? For me, I think one of the big ones is our current implementation of the commander's intent. Whenever you hear staff talk about transportation priorities, they will always say stuff like, well, it is important on this important corridor that every single mode has it can get through this corridor without delay. But I'm of the opinion that cars are a lot like Nazis. Have you heard the expression that if you have a Nazi in your bar and you don't kick them out of your bar, you now have a Nazi bar?
Yep, got that one.
So if you put cars in your infrastructure, even if it's like if you put cars in your bike or accommodate cars in your bike infrastructure or accommodate cars in your bus rapid transit, it is no longer a piece of bus infrastructure. It is no longer a piece of bike infrastructure. It is now a piece of car infrastructure. So I think one of the big problems on the ground is that staff's current priority is everything, and they don't actually have a priority.
Yes. Yeah.
So that for me is one issue that we need to solve in this process. What else you got?
I think that actually sums up in a lot of cases is that our main solution, we have kind of like one trick for bus priority, and it's fully separating space for buses, which is true. Like that, because that's our one trick, we have kind of only the option of like, yes, we have to buy up a lot of land and do all the things. But there's a lot of different kind of approaches you can take that. You can kind of look at how cars and traffic in general move and circulate on the peninsulas in particular. That's where like a lot of our traffic bottlenecks are. And essentially just like choose priority routes that are bus only, even if cars can be on the path.
What do you mean?
So, oh gosh, what's a good example? We do this sometimes with bike infrastructure, but you can do the same thing with buses. But essentially the Spring Garden Road transit priority corridor.
How would that work? Oh, sorry. So like, even though Spring Garden is, wait, I might have lost you there.
So in an actual functional version of that, cars are still technically on Spring, so like they can cross Spring Garden.
Oh, I see. They can go across
cars still exist, and they might even do a quick turn on Spring Garden. That's allowed.
Yeah.
But it's not a through movement for cars.
Right.
So like a bus would, if you're sitting on the bus, you might still see a car out the front window on the bus.
Right.
That's okay. And we do that, some bikeways are better than others, as I'm sure everyone knows. But like Dahlia has no traffic, functionally speaking. Like I think I was up through there almost every day for 3 years. I think I saw a dozen cars the whole time. There's like almost no traffic.
Yeah,
except for the side streets.
Yeah, like Maple, for example, has a lot of cross traffic. But Dahlia Street itself, I think, I've been using that for a couple of years, and I think my vehicle count on Dahlia is maybe 12. Yeah.
And it's because it's a path of travel that's useful for bikes, because bikes can go in the Dartmouth Commons.
Yes,
but cars hopefully can't drive on the Dartmouth Commons.
They totally can. I see work trucks in there all the time. They're not normally there. Yeah.
And you can kind of do the same thing with buses, is essentially just say like, hey, beyond this point, it's buses only. There's obviously the enforcement issue because, oh boy, we all lived through the Spring Garden Road pilot phase, RIP. But, there's the difficulty with how the city actually implements this stuff, but the underlying logic of take a route and make it only accessible to buses. So one thing that came up when I was doing the part 1 of the Commons video was, hey, if you reapportion space at the Willow Tree intersection, say by doing something like closing off Cogswell, then what's currently the lane that feeds onto Cogswell from Quinpool, it's actually not that hard to just get a bus to make a simple left turn into that lane, and then that becomes a transit priority lane on Windsor Street. Right. And so then you could have Windsor Street and Roby form a coherent corridor that's bus only.
Right. Although I do actually think staff looked into making Roby. Are you talking like both ways on Roby and Windsor, or one way, like paired one ways?
Both ways. So essentially the north end of Roby
never mind.
Yeah, fair enough.
Staff did not look into that.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can do stuff, but that's one option, is essentially giving paths of travel that are unique to transit, and that can often be very cheap because you only have to fix a single point as opposed to running a bus lane the entire length of the peninsula.
Right. And when you're talking, so essentially what you're saying, if I can paraphrase just to make sure I understand, like in somewhere like Spring Garden, you could have buses where like you control access for the through route. So cars can't go through Spring Garden, but if you have a destination on Spring Garden, if you live there, have a delivery or whatever, you can take a side street, get in, do it, and get out without actually taking Spring Garden from the public gardens down to Barrington or whatever.
Yeah, it's the idea of like you can totally have access to it. You just can't use it for mobility purposes.
Right, okay. Which makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that you think we need to know before we start rocking through what we would do or how we would maybe try and fix this problem instead?
It's going to be route dependent, so you're going to get different solutions for different places, because some places have crazy amounts of extra space that you can almost just get a free bus lane out of.
So the whole point of this exercise, though, is to explain the framework of how we're approaching these decisions, so that when we get to those individual points, we can be like, this is what we need to do when we get here. Therefore, following these priorities in this way will get us to this solution, which is one that is good and not what we currently get.
Got it.
So for this, due to the recency and newsiness of it, I think we should mainly focus on how we would fix the BRT from Kennard to the Bedford Highway through the Windsor Street Exchange.
Sure.
So we're going to take Roby and the Windsor Street Exchange as our two big problem spots. And so, like, we have these priorities. We have our intents. So we're increasing bus traffic. we are road safety, and we're not spending money. And I think there might have been another one, but those are the three big ones, I think. So how would you go about doing that on Robie Street, and why?
So the big difficulty with Robie Street is the current volume of road traffic is that it doesn't just back up away from the intersection for a significant length. It often goes intersection to intersection to intersection.
Right. The water stops at each faucet until it turns on.
That's it. Yeah. So during peak hours, if you've ever been on Robie Street during kind of evening rush hour, it can be backed up all the way from essentially
to Smew, basically.
Almost, yeah. Yeah. I've
Dal, at least.
Yeah, I've done it for a video once. I sat on the 7 to record like, hey, how long does it take a bus to get to the north end? It's a long time.
Yes.
So part of the issue with that is that there's not quite enough space for everyone, frankly. But what you can do is essentially give the bus the leading interval at each intersection.
Right.
So that's just signal priority. And
Right.
essentially it means if there's a bus present, then that lane goes and everyone else gets to wait.
So how do you get the bus to the front of the lane, though? Because in order to reduce, and the reason I wanted to talk to you is because you mentioned that staff should go backwards.
Yes.
And so, like, if we were to take our three priorities, increasing buses, increasing road safety, and not spending any money, is there a simple, this is a leading question to get you to say the thing that I'm wanting you on this podcast to say, but like, is there something that you could do, like some sort of quantitative metric or evaluation that you could use to kind of guide your decision to hit these three priorities?
So, I mean, like the really simple thing that you can do, which like came up in New York recently, is just like congestion pricing. Currently, the city doesn't have like the, I don't know if you call it like the legislative authority.
This is not what I'm talking about the planning thing,
fair.
the times.
Times?
Yeah, you were like, okay, so.
Oh, the average speeds.
Yeah, there we
so
go.
that does feed into like congestion pricing is like one way that you would do that.
Okay, I'll let you cook. I'm very sorry.
No, it's cool. It's a weird, complicated topic. There's a bunch of ways to do it, and they all have like upsides and downsides. So we're probably going to go in circles.
100%.
So
that's why we have priorities to break us out of these circles on one of those paths.
Yeah. So one thing for transit is that what you want to look for is average travel time, which is just distance covered over how long it took you to do it. And people think when they look at the speed limits that are like 50 or 60 or 40 or 30, that's kind of going to dictate how fast you go. That is mostly not the case, especially during rush hour. So I mapped out just for funsies, like how fast do buses go in the city? So I'm
15 kilometers an hour on average.
Yeah, you're pretty close.
Yes.
Nailed it.
Is it? What is it?
So I mapped it out. If you take the 9, if you start at Herring Cove Road and Deneth, which is like kind of quote unquote downtown Spryfield kind of. If you take the 9 and you want to be, let's say it's Scotia Square downtown for work at like 8 or 9 o'clock, you're going to be traveling at an average speed of 16.6 kilometers an hour.
Woo.
It's fast.
That's
It's
going
faster.
to be the same for driving, though, right? Probably, because we don't have priority lanes, we don't have dedicated lanes, so that is just kind of the rate of general
speed.
traffic.
So because the bus takes some detours, it takes a longer trip and is forced to take more turns.
Oh, and probably stops for passengers as well.
And just stops for passengers. But a car, according to just Google like travel time estimates, at peak hours, the same kind of early morning rush hour trip, it's going to take you 16 to 35 minutes, which translates into an average speed of 13 to 27 kilometers an hour.
Okay.
So your best case scenario, or your worst case scenario by car is still faster than your best case scenario by bus. And that's part of the modal shift problem. And so like the way I would kind of approach this would say, from a planning perspective, hey, I want to get somebody by bus from Herring Cove Road in Deneth to Scotia Square in, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes, 90% of the time, 95%, whatever your cutoff is.
Yeah.
That's how long I want that to take.
Yeah.
And then work backwards and say, what do I have to do? What is the least amount of effort I can put into this to make that happen 90% of the time?
Okay. So let's assume then that, so how long do you think it should take to get from Kennard to Windsor Street Exchange on Robie Street then? I know you didn't give that out, but if you had
How
to
long
guess.
does that stretch kilometers-wise?
Well, they're looking at spending $150 million on 900 meters. So I'm going to guess it's maybe 2 kilometers.
I just threw up a little bit. I'm just such a cheapskate. Yeah, I mean, how badly do you want Robie Street to be a coherent corridor for cars and buses?
Is that one of our priorities?
Not really.
There we go. So we don't. Our priorities are what?
It's buses and safety and mode shift.
There we go.
Yeah.
So
So
and saving money.
Yeah, and saving money. So do we need, if we accommodate cars, does that cost us more money?
It does.
So should we cut that option if we're following our priorities?
You should maybe find some alternatives for those drivers.
All right. If we want to make buses faster, should we accommodate car traffic?
Looks like that's going to be tough if you want to save the money.
Probably not. Yeah, right. So if in my opinion, and why we're doing this is like if you actually be like, what are the outcomes we want, and if you come into that if you come into your problem solving with what are the outcomes we're actually trying to achieve, you'll get different solutions.
Yep.
And I think one of the big problems that we're trying to demonstrate with this exercise is that staff's priorities are not, in fact, council's priorities.
That's been like you've covered this in your reportings, and I've gone on long rants about it with friends and family. That like what.
I want to come to your parties. Those sound fun.
It's just me ranting. But there's just a massive disconnect between like our priority is X, and then like, so what are you doing? We put up some stickers about safety or whatever, and it's like, well,
oh my god. Okay,
is it a priority though?
I think one of the other priorities we should have that's kind of tangential, so it's not like super important, but also like critically important, is the fact that our planning needs to be evidence-based.
Yeah, sure.
And one of the things that blows my mind is like, so do you know, this is a sidebar, and I just learned this, so I really want to share it with everyone who knows. What is the safest way to cross at a crosswalk?
Do you mean like actually safe?
If I'm at a crosswalk, statistically speaking, what is the safest way for me to get across that street?
Statistically, it's like
jaywalking. What should yeah,
it's actually jaywalking.
So, but there's a study that I don't know when it came out because I can't remember right now, but it was first highlighted in 2018, which I realized. But the safest way to cross a crosswalk is stepping out without looking and being confident.
Yeah.
Like it's something crazy. Like 67 or 76% of drivers will stop if you don't make eye contact, but won't if you do. And I was talking to my wife about this. She's like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, yeah, of course it does. Because if the pedestrian sees me, I know that they see me, and they know that I'm dangerous. So I'll just keep going because I know that they won't go if I keep driving.
A lot of our safety stuff is premised on the idea that like it was an innocent mistake. It's like
no, it was a conscious choice.
Yeah, like there's accidents can happen, but also a lot of things are choices. They're like they saw them. You
cannot. One of the biggest challenges that I think we have in enforcement of road safety is that you cannot prove criminal intent for a driver behind the wheel.
Yeah.
So everything has to be an accident, even though we know empirically they're not.
The most dangerous person on the road for me, if I'm on the road on a bike, is somebody you can always hear the thought process as they're doing something dangerous, and he's like, I can totally fit. And you're like, don't do it.
No, you can't
do it.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Anyways, that's a little bit of a sidebar. So we have our priorities. We don't want to spend money. We want to get buses from Roby to Windsor, and I'm going to say 5 minutes is realistic based on stops.
Sure.
Yeah. So how do we do that?
You need to get the cars out of the way.
How do you do that?
There's a bunch of ways. You can either divert them to an adjacent street. So maybe you say... So Windsor Street has a lot of capacity limitations at the southern end towards Quinpool.
Yep.
It just can't...
Yep.
It can't send a lot of cars onto Roby Street, but it has a lot of ability to absorb cars if they're going north towards them. So diverting cars off of Roby at the Kennard intersection up north onto Windsor.
You would put them northbound. You would essentially keep Windsor a two-way and two-way for cars and make Roby a two-way for buses, basically?
Yeah, something like that. I'm trying to like plan out where the space availability is, but yeah, something like that. So divert the cars. If you're accepting the premise that you're not going to have fewer cars, then they need to go somewhere else, basically, if you want the transit to run freely. Or conversely, you just need fewer people to take cars, which is a recurring issue with a lot of city planning is just, oh gosh, if we could get 10% of the population to stop driving downtown and instead hop on the bus or bike or walk or whatever.
Why would I ever take the bus downtown?
It's faster.
I can get free parking now at the hospital.
Yeah.
They're going to validate that, but they're going to validate that in the same way the casino validated its parking for VIP members. $10 for 24-hour parking? Hell yeah. Free parking at the IWK? Hell yeah. As soon as someone figures out how to game that automated validation system, RIP congestion downtown. Anyways.
Why are we like this?
Because we don't want our hospitals to get $20 million in annual funding.
Yeah.
We don't need healthcare funding. We need more cars. Anyway, sorry.
I've been in favor of cutting funding to the hospitals forever.
And Tim Houston is the guy that made it happen.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Anyways, no. So yeah, I think okay, fair enough. So you want cars to go somewhere because you do. So, but what about the cars? What about the people who live on Roby? Because if we're talking about Spring Garden and if we're talking about car access, even if we're not talking about car throughput, for me, how I would approach this problem, I don't think I would take all car traffic off of Roby. I really don't think I would. But I don't want to spend any more money, which means I got to use the lanes that we have, and I do still want to provide car access to Roby for the businesses and the people that live there. However, due to the fact that cars have engines, for me it's not that big of a deal to be like, well, if you want to go downtown with your car from Roby and Almond, you do need to take a detour from your house because why the fuck are you making that trip by car? So I'm fine I would make it one-way northbound because I do think trucks leaving the port 100%. I think there's an argument there until the province or the feds get on their ass with rail out of the port, which is why not? But I'm assuming that's not going to happen for a whole bunch of reasons. I don't think Carney and his people are going to.
Not their biggest priority.
Well, even if it is, like we're 5-10 years down the road anyway, right? Yeah, so I would probably make one way northbound on Roby. I would make it one way inbound on Windsor. And I think what that would do is that it would naturally incentivize people who live on Roby. If they were going into town, it would incentivize them not to take their car. It would incentivize them to either take transit, the BRT that's on their doorstep, or the bike share, scooter share that we're going to have in like 10 days or whatever. So like that for me is how I would do it. I would save the money, and I suspect, I don't know if that would work, but I would probably game it out and figure out what the transit time would actually be. The only other thing that I want to talk about here, really about in this planning process here, is like LRT. How would you incorporate LRT? And I actually have questions about it. I think maybe better just to ask you because you might know more about infrastructure. No? Okay.
Probably not.
how long is a piece of infrastructure supposed to last? 25 years, 50 years, 75 years?
Oh, I mean, it depends on the infrastructure, but like rail can last a really long time as long as you don't get like crazy. I mean,
street.
Oh, like a street?
It's 25, 30 years, right?
You can game them out. I've been trying to do the math on like what is the annualized cost of road, and I keep getting like different estimates, but a lot of time the planning is something like 40, 50 years sometimes.
Okay.
But that's usually sort of like build the road, and then you keep doing refreshing stuff every 5 or so years, and then usually by the year 40, 50, it's like this thing just needs to be.
Are those refreshing things ever like substantial changes to road use, or is it just kind of like repaving, recaps, and pothole filling?
You get the like pothole filling type stuff where it's like just keep it nice.
Okay.
And then probably every 5 or 6 or 10 years or so, you get these like big, $300,000 per kilometer spend where you're like, I need to resurface this thing.
Okay. Yeah. So here's another one of my big problems with BRT that I would have incorporated in my planning processes at some point. We know that the long-term plan of BRT is at some point LRT. That's one of our long-term goals. And we know infrastructure, for the sake of argument, we're going to say everything we're building now lasts 40 years. Is LRT in a 40-year time horizon or a 40-plus year time horizon? Right? Like this is information I think we need to know, because if we're going to build LRT in 20, 25 years, anything we do on Roby Street needs to be
compliant.
It needs to be ready so that when we do the resurfacing,
just swap it out.
Exactly. Yep. And so everyone's saying, well, we have LRT. LRT is a priority, but we're not saying when, which means we can build infrastructure now as though it's never actually going to happen, because and again, we're making the assumption here that the roads are going to last 40 years before they're like structurally repaired. So you're wasting money. If you're not planning for LRT now, but you are going to have LRT within 40 years, whatever we're doing now, if we're not building it that way, is a waste of money, because we know in 15, 20 years, we're going to need to redo the whole street again to put LRT in. If we had roughed it out now, we wouldn't have to spend that money for another 40 years.
Yeah, and you kind of get the catch. I think that came up in one of your episodes earlier, was like kind of the difference between we're doing the Windsor Street Exchange and we're also doing Roby Street.
Yeah.
And we're not clear if those two things tie together. And we're like, but we're doing them currently.
Yeah, we're doing them concurrently, and they're both in service of a plan that has an overarching, how we connect the whole city on BRT. So like, how have we spent 6 years on two concurrent capital projects that are supposed to last 40 years and accommodate this flagship piece of infrastructure and policy, and we have no idea how they connect together?
Did you want those to connect to each other? Was that intentional?
I have no fucking idea.
I don't know.
So, but like that's one of the big issues here, and you can't really game that out in a tabletop because that's an issue with, I think, how the city is doing its planning.
Well, and it's so far out. Like, it's easy to say like, oh, add a bus lane here or redirect traffic here, because you can visualize what the city looks like now and can kind of sort of imagine what the impacts would be to traffic.
Right.
Yeah, like I'm sure a professional planner somewhere is cringing and dying, but like you can at least imagine like, oh wow, that would probably back up traffic here, and maybe that's okay. You want to do that. What does LRT look like in 30 years? It's so alien to what the city currently works as that it's hard to game that out.
So how would you, and then so that's the other half of this, how to fix Halifax's BRT plan, is how do you fix the strategic plan to do that? Like, what does the city need to have done? So we kind of laid out the intent, and it was very hodgepodge, and we're doing it very fast because I know this is a very weedy episode. I'm trying to make it move fast so we're not losing people or whatever. But like, so we kind of gamed out in very rough strokes how you would do it for like 2 kilometers of the BRT. So what do you think the city would need to do in order to have the solutions that we're talking about or thinking about on the Robie Street section? What do you think the larger plan needs to look like in order for staff to be coming to council with like, oh, hey, here's how this fits into our larger BRT? I mean, besides obviously having done a kind of like very rough 30% functional plan of the entire BRT network, which I'm assuming is kind of like foundational. But other than that, like, what do you think the city needs to do to make sure all these pieces fit together?
So like at an organizational level, I wonder if like that planning stage maybe needs to go away from public works.
Yeah, I think so.
Like it seems like they're very individual project focused, which is like, that's fine. That's their job. Their job is to build the thing.
Yeah.
That's totally
their
okay.
job is to make puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
Not design the puzzle.
And like, that's totally okay. They honestly, like, most of their work is like, they did exactly what they just were instructed to do.
Yeah.
So, but like the actual strategic planning, it seems like we almost don't have that. And so we are just doing project A, project B, and then we get partway through project B and be like, oh yeah, these don't even connect to each other.
Yeah.
And so you end up with things like, for bike stuff, you end up with like a bikeway going up Pine Street that's too steep to climb because just nobody thought that through. Yeah. Because you have an infrastructure piece here, an infrastructure piece there, and the only way between them is an unclimbable hill. And they're like, well, whatever.
Or if you're on Dahlia Street, every 10 to 20 meters is a different sign. One saying share the lane, one saying single file, share the road, one saying at bikes and drivers side by side, and the next one saying single file, and the next one saying side by side, and the next one saying single file.
So you're just weaving between lanes.
And how the fuck is that not fixed yet? I made a presentation at TSC 3 years ago about that sign. All you got to do is take down. You want to know what? I'm not going to say I'm going to do that, but I suspect that those signs might disappear. It won't be me.
No, it's and like, yeah, that's the big thing, is that we don't have at an organizational level in HRM. I think we have planners, and like a lot of the plans they come up with are not crazy. Yeah. At an individual project level, they plan good projects or like defensible projects, and we build good defensible projects, and then none of them work together in a coherent space. We have a regional government, but not regional planning.
Yes.
We have in a weird way hyper local planning. We have street by street, project by project planning processes, and we don't have like a regional. It just like, we have to like pick a goal, like a concrete quantitative goal that's like, I want to get people from Dentith and Herring Cove Road to downtown in 15 minutes or 20 minutes. 15 is really ambitious. And it's like, how we do that's going to change as the city grows.
Yes.
But I always want to be able to get somebody from that intersection to downtown in 20 minutes.
Yeah. And like, when you're thinking about strategic planning too, I think that's one of the things that's so frustrating is that like, not having this framework that we're talking about, or a type of framework that we're talking about in place, is costing the city huge amounts of money. Both, we're talking about we're buying real estate on Robie Street to accommodate car traffic on a bus priority corridor, which is not in any way, shape, or form money spent on increasing bus rapid transit. Staff are clear about that. It's about maintaining car connectivity. So we're spending money there. We're wasting money in the sense that if we are going to have LRT, it's probably going to be within 40 years. And if we're not building it now, we're going to have to spend that money. But on top of that, the province is now being huge dicks, right? And they're making it so that if the city doesn't do planning that they want, the province can make them do it.
Yeah, you didn't build enough car lanes, so we're going to build them for you and make you pay for it.
But the province does not make you pay for it. It's enter into a cost-sharing agreement. And if you read the legislation itself, which is like Clause 94, TAC, whatever, it reads to me like if the city can say, oh, we could actually do this project for $10 million. Like, say, for example, they took our plan, one of your plans, either the Windsor Street car bonanza or my paired one-way for cars on Windsor and Roby. We don't need to buy that real estate. We can achieve council's priorities minus that $46 million, and it'll probably be less or $64 million, whatever it is. The design will be less because we don't need to design the extra lanes, yada, yada, yada. So the city would be able to say, oh, no, yeah, if you want to add car lanes to Roby, you can, but we can do this is a bus project, and we can do this bus project for $35 million. If you want to add the car lanes, you need to give us $115 million to make up the difference because we can do it in 35. Yeah. If you want to spend the money, that's fine, but we don't have money, and we can do it for $35 million. And so not only are we committing ourselves to money we don't need to spend with the extra lanes, we're committing ourselves to future money to try and fix the mistakes we're making now to implement LRT within 40 years, like we got to do it before the life cycle of the infrastructure. And we're making it so that the province has leverage on us to make us pay money that we don't want to do because it goes against our priorities. Like, if we don't fix the strategic planning process, we're going to be forced by the province to spend money on projects that are not within council's priorities because we just don't have a better plan. So, like, that is, and if you were to take every single project and if you were to count the costs of, like, the lost opportunity costs of spending money on accommodating car traffic and say, this is a radio show. People can't see you crying here.
They can feel it.
Like, we're wasting so much money due to a lack of, like, this strategic planning the lack of strategic planning in the city is costing us so much fucking money. And it's costing the city money in the sense that they don't have capital money to spend. It's costing us money in the future because we're borrowing to build these huge projects build new infrastructure that we might not need. And it's costing us personally because now I need to go buy a car because I can't take the bike because it's not safe because they built a roundabout over here that's designed to make cars go faster. And can you just... I know this is in one of your videos, but can you just explain the issue with the roundabout? And I want everyone to go watch this video, HFX By Bike Commons Part 2. But can you just explain what the issue is with the quote-unquote Dutch-style roundabouts that we have out by the Commons there?
So they don't work.
On top of that.
Mic drop. No, so the goal of a roundabout is that instead of having an intersection where, I'm sure everyone who drives anywhere, they've rolled up to an intersection, there's red light, there's nobody in kind of the opposite directions, and you just sit at the red light. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially dead time. That's a waste of everyone's time. The goal of a roundabout is that there's like relatively free-flowing traffic. So if there's nothing in front of you, you can just go. The countervailing thing is that if there is something in front of you, you can't go. And that's the entire rule of a simple roundabout. That's the whole premise of the thing. And a Dutch-style roundabout, they're really good at designing them so that they're very, very safe. They're kind of maximally efficient within the framework of nobody here should die. Mm-hmm. And typically they're in an urban environment. They're single lane, so they're just dead simple. It's a circle of asphalt. Mm-hmm. It's one car lane wide. There's a little bit of tolerance for larger vehicles to move through it. But the target speed is usually something like 20 or 30 kilometers an hour. It's an intersection. Like, you're going to be interacting with pedestrians because they have so much bike infrastructure. They'll have one ring of pedestrian path and one ring of bike path outside of that. And so there's a lot of stuff that you have to... It's an intersection. You're interacting with stuff. The way that we design them here is essentially so that cars can travel through them doing 50 plus kilometers an hour. I think there are signs that say slow down to 30, but like if you ever go and watch them, like that's not how they work.
Oh no, they widened the road out by me, and it increased the speed from about 65 kilometers an hour to about 110.
It's very this is not new engineering science.
The lane is exactly the same width, except now there's paint and there's a huge shoulder.
There's more tolerance,
and the speed has increased by about 40 kilometers an hour.
It's now harder to drive off the road, so they feel more confident, so they go faster.
I'm totally comfortable changing my podcast while driving now.
Oh, of course,
it's so safe to do that.
I couldn't run off the road if I wanted to. So
feel fear in your bones, any engineer who just heard me say that, because it's fucking true.
Oh, they all do
if
it.
I don't have, no, it's so bad. If I don't have my phone like physically away from me, I now feel safe enough to be like, oh, I can just text to see when my phone's buzzing.
Literally, what could go wrong if it's that wide?
It's so much room.
Yeah.
Like, it is literally making me restart a bad habit that I didn't have on this road. Fuck.
Halifax traffic engineers work for the phone companies.
They work for auto insurance companies.
That's the new conspiracy theory. So the roundabouts, they're designed so that in the Netherlands, they're designed so that the approach lanes go directly at the center island or just slightly off of the center island. Mm-hmm. So that if you were to mindlessly hit the round, if you're just like drove straight at it mindlessly, you're going to hit something. Like it's 100% chance you'll hit something. Whereas the way that we tend to build them right next to one of our largest urban parks is to orient the lanes away from the traffic island. You can, in fact, for most of those lanes, drive in a straight line and just about get past the roundabout.
So if we had done a full Dutch-style roundabout at either one of these roundabouts, would the whole thing fit within what is currently the island?
Yeah, I measured it. So I essentially, when I make the videos, I tend to copy and paste a lot of infrastructure because, frankly, I can't draw that well.
Yeah, because you're lazy. We've been over this.
Yeah. I'm super lazy.
Videos.
So I just copy and paste stuff over and scale it to the correct size. And the entire traversable space for motor vehicle traffic fits just about inside the current center island.
So we're wasting money on that one too.
Yeah, it's a lot of extra asphalt.
100%.
To make it worse. We spend a lot of money to be as bad as we are at things.
It's crazy. So the reason I brought that up, even though it seemed tangential, if you stick with your priorities, which are increase bus transit, bus ridership. I can't remember what our first one was, but it's something to do with making the bus better, decrease costs, and increase road safety. If you applied those same three priorities to the redesign of the roundabouts by the Commons, you would have come up with a very different design. Like
how we design things, everything starts with the premise. Everything we do in Halifax very much starts with the premise of how do we get cars through this space doing 50 or 60?
Yeah.
And then
because that's the posted speed.
That's it. And then we say, how do we build a city on top of something where cars are going 50 and 60? So our main priority in practice is how do we keep the cars moving?
Yes.
And then whatever we can do on the side of that, well, that's great if we can do it.
And that's because the first Nazi in our transportation network was the McDonald Bridge, and we never kicked it out. So
unpopular take.
I was trying to bring a full circle there to close it off, but no, unpopular take, I want it.
Yeah. So this has come up in like one of my earlier videos on the McDonald Bridge, and Denny Sullivan has mentioned it. It's becoming like a weird obsession of mine. Is like actually traffic shouldn't be coming off the McDonald Bridge and going onto North Street.
100%.
It should be bus only.
Bus only, yeah. And you would say, speaking of saving money, if you were to take the same priorities that we have, not spending money, increasing road safety, and increasing bus reliability, if you were to take, and I do understand this is a provincial, they have to do it. It's not, the city can't do it. But you don't need to build a flyover lane if one of those car lanes is just converted to a bike lane. Yep. You don't need a flyover lane at all.
Yep.
And then it also decreases the amount of through traffic through the areas around Goddardson Street. It decreases the through traffic around what is now going to be like the other side, the Dartmouth side of the bridge is going to have like 50,000 people on it sometimes.
It literally cannot work. Like for how close the intersections are, for the amount of pedestrian traffic.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's doomed.
Yeah.
It can never work. And so because you're spending so much signal time moving traffic along North Street, that's signal time that robs from Robie Street.
Yeah.
So, there's a little bit of an induced demand aspect, but like the truth is that like a lot of the traffic flows are going to Dartmouth along Barrington. Mm-hmm. Kind of a weird sideshow stuff of traffic going across North Street that eats up a lot of capacity. Mm-hmm. And then everyone else is trying to go north-south off the peninsula. Yeah. And so just as a prioritization, you would just say like, hey, that's one of those like transit only access things we started off with, was essentially just saying, hey, that's never going to work for cars, so we're going to give it to the buses and bikes. Yeah. No, to me, that's one of, and it's so frustrating because if you were to just apply the same three priorities to every single infrastructure decision, you would kind of walk backwards into a better interconnected transit system, transportation system than what we currently have based on what we're doing, right? And like, I know I talked about it in the last episode, and this is a bonus episode. I don't want to go too into it, but like, our plan is fine. Like it really is fine. Those 4 steps of how we do transportation planning is like, that's perfect. Yep. Just
the other way. Just do it the other way. When we're doing the suburban plan, if it's not like, here's our land use and here's the transportation corridors that connects these land uses, we're going to have congestion. We're going to have all the same problems that we have right now.
Like the Deneth and Herring Cove Road intersection, like, you know, I just picked that as an example. Like, that's kind of the center-ish of Spryfield. But you go there on Google Maps, it's like, oh, it's a parking lot.
Yeah.
And you're like, and a drive-through, and you're like, right, okay, but if we did have BRT capped here, it would be like a 30-story tower.
Yes.
Is what it'd be ringed by high-density stuff. Yeah.
And it's wild to me because like staff keeps saying, well, you know, transit is the thing that allows development here. But like if you look at other countries, Japan is my favorite example. The reason their transit is so good is because real estate developers wanted to make money.
Yep.
Right. Like so. It's crazy to me that we do transportation so like it is costing our developers profits.
Yep.
It is costing taxpayers money. It is costing people's lives, and we won't fucking change it.
Yep. We spend a lot of time running buses at low frequencies out to the middle of nowhere. Just kind of, I think, more than buses has kind of gone. This the express buses, where essentially we just send buses off to the middle of nowhere.
Man, don't even get me started. I think about that all the time because
that's a separate rant.
I live rurally, but like, no, there's some places that has like a on-demand microtransit, which I think would be really fascinating. Where like. Because I live rurally, and I do need to know when I can get into town. But a lot of times, because going into town is like a trip, like it's a thing.
Yeah.
Because I live far enough out that if there's a bus where I'm like, hey, I need to go into town today, and I like log with Halifax Transit, hey, I need a trip today, and as soon as they get enough people saying they need to go into town, then they run a bus. If I know when it's coming, then that's fine. That's cool. Just as reliable.
The exact time doesn't matter as much for
as
those
long as
trips.
I know when that time is, right? And if I can, you know, pick it up at the end of my excerpt or whatever. But anyways, yeah, there's a whole bunch of things we could do if we just did things differently.
Yes.
And this episode was supposed to be a little bit of insight into how the city could or should do things differently. Is there anything else you want to talk about BRT planning? Anything?
No, I mean, like my main thing is just the city needs to pick actual goals.
Yes. Tangible, achievable, measurable.
Pick some neighborhoods and say, I want to get this person downtown or Burnside or wherever, whatever you want to do. Have a concrete goal in mind of say, I want to get this person downtown in 20 minutes using a bus. And everything, the long term, like things like mode shift. If somebody can get on the bus and be downtown from Spryfield in 20 minutes, a car stops being that competitive.
Right.
Like why would you bother?
Yeah. Like I'm spending $25,000, $30,000, $50,000 on the capital and $1,300 to $1,500 a year or month, whatever, because it's so much better.
Yeah,
like
it's not competitive.
The incentive for me to spend all that money on a car is gone if buses are even like half as competitive as they are now. Like I ride my bike out in from the boonies, which is like a 30-kilometer bike ride, and I invested in an e-bike with 2 batteries and a truck that can get me 3 kilometers, because even if I buy a Japanese mini truck and my e-bike, my transportation costs, even though I've had to replace my whole truck, like I ruined a truck, bought another one, and still my transportation costs are like 30% of what they were 2.5 years ago. Just by switching most of my trips to bike when convenient, and I haven't been able to do that for the past 3-4 months. And still my transportation cost, and even though it takes me 30 some odd minutes to ride from downtown to my house every day, and even though it sometimes takes me 25 minutes to drive, it will often take me 2 hours, whereas my bike always takes me 35.
It's the thing about biking when I first started was like, oh, it's the same time every time. Like I fully, because you're either in a bike lane or you're off to the side of the road. Traffic doesn't exist as a concept.
No.
And so if you just hate being in traffic, like I psychologically can't be in traffic. Then like just the ability of like, it takes 30 minutes. Yeah. It just always takes like 28 to 32 minutes. And that's just what it takes.
And I'm moving.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting and thinking about the fact that I'm, stuck in traffic, whatever.
Yeah.
Like I'm moving, and it is a reliable, I can bank on it.
Yep.
Anyways. So yeah, I can bank on the savings. I can bank on the time savings. I can just fucking fix your planning. Halifax, please. Halifax. Kevin, plug your pluggables.
You can find me on mostly Blue Sky nowadays. So K Wilson HFX, and the main channel is going to be HFX By Bike. I put out a video every 2 weeks, asterisk, unless I don't feel like it or I'm tired. So please stop by and leave a comment.
And on May 20th, you have teased a video that I'm quite looking forward to. Is this a, sorry, I'm making you talk about your work here. Inadvertent promo, but like you don't normally weigh into like opinion pieces on transportation. That's not normally your bag.
I do, like, I kind of have like a schedule built out where it's like a spotlight video on bike infrastructure and then a Let's Fix video, usually on that same one. And then trip video. So somebody you say, how would I get from here to here on bike? Because I don't know how to do it. And then usually probably every 2 months or so, I'll have a video that's essentially like an essay. And it just ranges in random, whatever.
Is that where the parking benefit district video came from?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And so on May 20th, can you tell me about, I'm really excited for this video. Can you tell me, like, just give me a Cole's Notes. What am I looking forward to on May 20th?
Sure. So I'm putting together a video that's going to look at traffic data in the city. So I've gotten a hold of, special thanks to Halifax Fire, some fire response time data around the city, and just looking at how much traffic congestion impacts basically how fast fire response times, how fast Halifax Fire can get around the city during the emergency, especially on the peninsula. And I'm also working with Dan Peterson, a mutual online friend.
He's a HRM data guru.
Yes.
He's just like, wouldn't it be cool if data could exist in this format? And then you don't even just tag him. He'll just in your replies. You mean like this?
Yeah, he just like appears.
Just magic.
So
he's a fucking wizard.
I've been trying to teach myself how to get the data, but I don't have enough time. So I've asked him to pretty please supply some transit kind of tardiness data.
Oh, nice.
So there will be kind of emergency vehicle response times and transit reliability data, and I'm basically going to make the case of like, hey, so your cars are really screwing up your city.
Cars or Department of Public Works is planning and building?
They're the same thing.
Oh, we'll leave it there. You can find me at Land of Sticks, wherever @ signs are bought and sold for free, which is Instagram and Blue Sky. And you can find me also on grandparade.news. And I don't know when this is going to come out, so it may be either this Monday or the Monday that just passed. The paper will be available in Atlantic News, so please go pick it up. Please go to grandparade.news and become a paid subscriber. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Later. Bye. Turn off.